Welcome to The Communicator, your quick journey into the world of chemical engineering. I'm Amanda Sabrino, AICHI Student Development Officer. Whether you're a chemie or just curious, join us as we make chemical engineering exciting and accessible. Time to catalyze some great conversations. Let's go!
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm AICHI Student Development Chair.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I'm AICHI's Corporate Events Chair, and this is The Communicator.
Today we're here with Sam, who's a graduate student at UT Austin. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Sam West. I'm a third-year PhD student here in the UT Chemical Engineering program. I'm in the Rosales and Kumar labs, Dr. Adrian Rosales and Dr. Manish Kumar. My project is largely looking at materials, specifically looking at droplet-based gel materials. So basically, if you think of like salad dressing or something like that, it's broadly kind of an emulsion. And so if you shake it up, it kind of makes one phase and then it kind of separates out into a couple of phases over time. And so my research is kind of helping to exploit that idea for a couple of different purposes, where basically if you emulsify it, and the thing that stabilizes the emulsion is something that's known as a surfactant or an amphiphile, which you may have heard of before, but broadly it's a molecule that has a part that's hydrophilic and a part that's hydrophobic. And so if you think about it, the oil is pretty hydrophobic, the water is pretty hydrophilic, and so the surfactant is able to kind of migrate to the surface of the droplet and kind of form a coating around it. And so what my research does is we create an emulsion with a bunch of water droplets with surfactant around them, and then we'll jam all of the droplets together just by centrifuging the mixture. And what happens is the oil gets excluded, and the droplets, instead of combining with each other, they form kind of an interconnected network. And so what other people have found is that you can insert membrane proteins at the interfaces of those droplets if you pick your surfactant right. And so what my research is doing is trying to create interesting responsive networks of interconnected droplets by inserting membrane proteins and seeing how the material properties of this droplet network change, or how the transport properties of this droplet network change. So it's a little bit of materials, a little bit of membranes, a little bit of biochemistry, biology, synthetic biology. It's a little bit of a lot of things, but yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So we're gonna ask some questions just about your process of getting into graduate school. And I guess we'll start with undergrad and the things that you did in undergrad that kind of led you to want to apply for grad school. If you could talk a little bit about that experience for yourself.
Yeah, so I did a couple of things in undergrad that kind of led me down this path. So I guess first and foremost, research was the biggest thing. So yeah, I worked in kind of not exactly the field I'm working in now, more in kind of like classic commodity polymers, so like polypropylene, polyethylene. And the one thing I would say is that I feel like my research journey was a little bit different than other people's research journey of undergrads who end up going to grad school, but any of them, could help you end up there. So in undergrad, I, for my first couple of years, did a lot of teaching. I was a tutor through the university tutoring service for a bunch of the chemie classes, where they let you, after you take the class, if you do well enough, then you can tutor in the class. And so I was a tutor there. I was a group tutor. We had what's known as a plus leader, which was we would lead problem solving sessions twice a week. And so I was a problem solving session leader for one of the people who would later be my academic advisor, or my research advisor later in undergrad. And then so I had already been a problem-solving session leader with her, and then later in my undergrad, I took a class with her as well. We had kind of kept in touch, and I had been interested in doing research. I actually had a research internship set up for 2020 in the summer, but then with the Department of Energy, but then obviously with COVID, they were like, oh, there's not enough lab space, but if you'll reapply for the next summer, you'll be at the top of the list, basically. And then as it got closer to the next summer, or as it got later in that year, I was maybe getting some signs that I don't know if that's going to necessarily be in the cards. So I was talking to the professor who would later end up being my undergrad research advisor, and was basically saying, oh, I would love to go to grad school, but, a big part of going to grad school is having research experience and having shown that, like, you're interested in doing research, which I had been interested but hadn't done any research up to that point. And so she, through the process of me kind of getting to know her through being a problem-solving session leader and then taking class with her, we'd been able to build enough of a relationship where she said, basically, I have this really cool project. It's kind of new. I have no idea if it's going to work. If you wanted to come and just give it a try, I think it would be, A, some really good research experience for you, and B, I would love to have you come and try these formulations of whatever substance they were trying to make. And basically the project kind of broadly was trying to get molecules to diffuse to the interface between plastic films and then apply like a pulse of light such that it would locally heat the interface and it would separate the films from each other to make recycling easier. But in any case, it was definitely quite the experience because it was a joint project between her and another faculty member. And a lot of the time, I kind of had no idea what I was doing. But, in many ways, that's kind of a lot of the essence of the research process is a lot of the time you're going to be like, I have no clue what I'm doing, but by kind of taking the slow, methodical steps and looking, okay, well, what's the next thing I can try? Okay, well, that didn't work, obviously. That kind of crashed and burned. But what is another option I could try? And in many ways, it was a good introduction to the research process that I feel like has served me really well in grad school. And so between the teaching and the research and taking classes that were interesting and relevant, I kind of knew from the beginning I was interested in doing research. A lot of it was just, do I want to do research in an industry capacity or in an academic capacity? And as I was talking to my undergrad PI, or principal investigator, I don't know if you guys have used that term before, but as I was talking to her, she was really instrumental in helping me to decide what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go to grad school, and she as well was very good at helping me see my options for, oh, you should apply to this place, oh, you should apply to this place, they have a really good polymer program, oh, I know that person, because the other thing that I realized during undergrad is like, oh wow, the academic field is really small, where so many people know each other as well. But she was very good about helping me to figure out what I wanted. And so I guess that's kind of the first thing I would say is like, if you're interested in grad school, the biggest thing is like finding someone that can kind of support you on your journey and can help you along the way. That was really, really helpful for me as I was considering grad school and then eventually applying to and now going to grad school.
Oh,
so,
sweet.
Yeah.
So how do you think, like, with the teaching and stuff, like, is your plans after grad school to, like, become a professor, or would you want to work in research still?
Maybe eventually become a professor. I think it would be, I'm interested in maybe leaving the academic community for a little bit, at least at this point. Who knows what will change between now and when I'm defending and leaving. But I think as of now, I'm hoping to maybe go into industry and get some industry experience, maybe doing industrial research, or maybe go to a national lab. A lot of the research that I'm currently doing, there are people at national labs that I read a lot of their papers, and they're doing kind of similar research or are going towards similar goals. And so it is definitely not out of the cards for me to maybe look into either a national lab or something industry, or who knows, maybe over the next 2 years I'm going to be like, I want to be a professor right now, and so then I'll go and do my postdoc at a couple of places and then go down that tenure track, faculty track. But as of now, probably looking either like a national lab, doing research, like government research, or potentially going into industry and doing research for some company.
Cool.
Okay, so with the process of why you wanted to apply for grad school, why did you end up deciding to come here?
Yeah, so I was looking at a couple of different places, a couple of different programs that maybe had focuses in different areas. As a part of the grad school application process, in addition to applying, after looking at the different programs, they also host like recruitment weekends where they bring you here and they bring you wherever, and they, you know, kind of sell their pitch on what makes their university special. You get to go and do, you know, some things in the area, see the department, see the grad students. And I think that one of the biggest things that led me to UT was I really felt like I got along well with the faculty here. That was definitely one thing. I felt like even during the recruitment process, I got along really well with Dr. Rosales and Dr. Kumar, who are now my two PIs, as well as the Austin area is obviously really awesome. As a part of the recruitment weekend, they took us canoeing on Lady Bird Lake, and so that was pretty cool. And, you know, they definitely showed like how cool it is to be in the Austin area and how many fun things to do, as well as the grad students themselves. Many of them seemed like happy and seemed like they enjoyed doing their research. I know that like going to grad school can have the assumption sometimes, or the stereotype that everyone's just like sad all the time and it's like, oh my god, this all stinks. And granted, you know, a lot of the time it can be a little bit tough, especially if your experiments aren't working, but at the end of the day, it seemed like all of the grad students here had a really nice community, and I felt like I got along well with the personality of them, as well as there were a couple of people who I had talked to in undergrad before who are currently now at UT, and they just had really glowing things to say about the program. And so all of those kind of coalesced, and I think those were the biggest factors in why I ended up choosing Texas.
It's great. We've heard a lot of grad students say that they came here because the other grad students seemed happy, which is really sweet.
Yeah, no, I think grad school is very hard some of the time. If nothing's working, or you're running an experiment and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I didn't realize this one small detail and now it feels like weeks of work. I was like, no, I've been running this experiment wrong the whole time. But, you know, I think the kind of research process is a lot better if you're with both other students that are really supportive and can help you make a good community, as well as like if you find a good mentor, if you find someone whose leadership style works really well for you, and so that they can help guide you through your research process as well. Because at the end of the day, the whole point of the PhD in my mind is to kind of help you to develop those research skills and develop very specific knowledge in a certain discipline in a very narrow field of research, but at the end of the day, you've learned how to kind of work through these problems and think through, okay, well, that didn't work. Well, let's try something else. Okay, well, that didn't work. Well, how can we change whatever system we're trying to work with so that now it will work? But yes, all of that was a big contributing factor of why I am glad that the grad students here are happy.
Yes.
Great. Can I ask, when you get into grad school, I know you like start with classes and stuff. How do you decide like who your advisors are going to be and like which person's lab you work in?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there are a few different philosophies that people will follow. So obviously you want to be working for someone whose research interests you. You don't want to be doing something that you hate for 4 or 5 years. And so that's definitely a big factor, and actually can be something that will draw a lot of people to a grad school in the first place. Of if there's a faculty member or a couple of faculty members that really do research that seem appealing to them, or there's a particular research area that is really renowned at a particular university, it can draw people to a given program. So that's obviously factor number one. Factor number two is, and depending on who you talk to, arguably even more important, is the advisor that you're selecting. The advice that both of my advisors gave me is that your project that you're doing, your research, will probably change a good bit over the course of your time in grad school. But what's not going to change is your boss, is your mentor. And so finding a research advisor, like I was mentioning before, finding a research advisor whose leadership style you feel like you really click with can be really helpful in that process of applying to grad school and starting to talk to faculty and that sort of thing. In particular, like some faculty are very hands-off, where they'll just kind of leave it up to you to do the problem solving, and then once a month, or however often, you'll be like, this is what I've been doing, and they'll maybe give you some general tips, but at the end of the day, it's more of an independent process. And then there are other faculty that potentially like to be more involved and potentially like to say, oh, well, that didn't work, well, maybe you could try this, and like to have a more active hand in helping you out with your research, or a more active hand in kind of talking with you and kind of being there with you throughout the research process. And I think both advising styles have pros and cons and are both really useful for different people, or maybe even for the same person, just at different times in your PhD. Like I know Dr. Rosales has a policy where early on in the PhD, it's more of a hands-on style of kind of helping you with like, I don't know what experiment to do next. And she'll be like, oh, well, you could check out this resource or this resource or this resource. And then as you get further along in your PhD, you start to develop a better and better knowledge of the field that you're working in. It turns into more of an independent of like, here's broadly what I'm trying to do. And then she is able to kind of adjust her advising style of like, okay, well, here are the broad things that I think would be helpful with that. But, once again, that's just one advising style. And I would encourage anyone looking into grad school to kind of think about what advising style they think might work best for them, as well as, you may think that one advising style will work best for you, and then another advising style, you realize, oh, I wish that they would be more hands-on or more hands-off. And so being upfront about communicating that as well as you're kind of learning what works best for you as well. So
going on that tangent, do you have any other advice for people who are thinking about applying to grad school or in the process, like timing, decisions, anything like that?
Yeah. So I would say if you're interested in doing research, get involved with research early, that in a way that, if anything, I did not quite have that experience, but like, if research is something that you're passionate about and science is something that you're passionate about, I would encourage you to, don't hesitate to reach out to faculty. Like, feel free. I know a lot of faculty will, if you send them an email like, hey, I think your research is really interesting, I would love to meet up with you. Or, hey, here's my resume, I would love to do research with you in your lab. I would say probably most of the faculty in the department would love to sit down and chat with you about what your interests are, as well as if they think you'd potentially be a good fit to do research in the lab. The other thing is starting to just look at scientific literature, where I know it can feel like a really steep learning curve, especially at first when you're trying to sit down and read a scientific paper and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea what any of these words are saying. All of these words seem like gibberish to me. Even just finding some scientific literature in a field that seems interesting to you and you feel like, as you're reading it, you're able to understand at least some of the words. I think that's a really great skill to develop if you're interested in potentially going to grad school, because a lot of grad school is reading previous scientific literature. And like any other skill, reading scientific literature is a skill that you can develop. And so I think the earlier that you get started in just learning how to read through, or learning what the best way for you to read through scientific literature so that you can get the most out of it, that's a really good skill to start developing early. As well as, like, I think as you're doing research, talking to other grad students about their application process, talking to other grad students about like what schools were you considering? What were the factors you were considering when you were applying to a grad program? And you'll get a different answer from every person. And so a lot of it, as you're getting in the latter half of your undergrad, is just figuring out, okay, if I do want to go to grad school, what are the factors that are important to me? Why am I going to grad school? What are the reasons that I'm wanting to proceed on this path? Is it because I'm wanting to do research? And like, would I want to do industrial research instead? Or is grad school the way that I want to go, where I would love to be kind of as a part of that more academic community? As well as like if you have the opportunity to talk, if you are doing research and have the opportunity to talk with your research mentor about it, I would highly encourage that as well. They've been in the field even much longer than I have, and so I think it can be really helpful to talk with someone who's been doing it for a good bit longer, regardless of whether they're a younger faculty member or an older faculty member, but getting their advice as well of, I am interested in doing grad school, but I don't really know where to start. I think I'm interested in this subject, or I really enjoyed what I'm doing in undergrad and want to do more of it, or I really enjoyed it, but I maybe want to do something slightly different. And so, yeah, I think all of those are really awesome things I would consider when potentially applying for a grad school. As well as, you'll probably hear this from most faculty advisors, and this is just my opinion, but I think most academic people will also share this opinion of look outside of UT. And obviously there are some extenuating circumstances where I know people that have done grad school at the same institution where they did their undergrad and it worked great for them, but most professors and arguably most grad students would probably recommend look at other places. Increasing the breadth of knowledge that you're going to get at UT, which is obviously covers a lot of areas, but at the end of the day has a very set list of people that are here, as opposed to talking to tons and tons of other people at whatever other universities are out there, across the US or even across the world. It can be really, really valuable as you're starting to look at grad school, in my opinion. So as if you're interested in looking at grad school, then don't be afraid to look at lots of different places. Yeah, I know that was a lot, but that was a lot of thoughts about my grad school application process.
Okay, thank you.
Great. How did you decide how many schools you wanted to apply to, and when did you start working on that application?
Yeah, so I think I applied to 6 schools in general. I want to say that's kind of close to the median. I actually don't know, so don't quote me on that. But I think in some ways it's a lot like undergrad admissions in the way that, specifically in that, the more schools you apply to, obviously the more options you'll have potentially, but obviously there's a lot of time and effort that goes into writing those applications and curating your thoughts and your research methods that you're wanting to put into a grad school application, specifically curated to each grad program that you're applying to. And so I think it really comes down to if you're definitely, I would recommend applying to more than one school, and also kind of maybe building a pyramid of, there are a couple schools. You probably got similar advice in undergrad. Apply to some schools that, after talking maybe with a research mentor or a grad student, that you think, okay, I feel like this is a school where maybe they're not quite as selective. Basically don't only apply to the most selective schools, because then if you don't get in any of them, then it's okay, well, now what am I going to do? So kind of apply to a diverse range of schools. And I think, 5 to 6 worked well for me, but I know people that applied to up to 10 grad schools, and that sounds crazy to me. I can't imagine doing that. But if you're really wanting to do that, then do that. Or I know people that applied to 2 or 3, even 1 grad school, which I don't know, I would not specifically choose to do. But if you're really set on going to this one particular program, and you feel like you have a good case that you can build for why you'd be a great fit at that program, then I guess more power to you. I personally recommend having a couple schools at least that maybe have different fits or different faculty members. But yeah, I think showing the intellectual curiosity and being enthusiastic about research and showing that you're wanting to do research and wanting to learn is really important in any of those grad school applications. And so I think that was the first half of the question of how many grad schools. What was the other?
When did you start?
Oh, yeah. When? So I started writing, so I did 4.5 years at undergrad, and so I graduated in the fall because I started as a biology major actually, and then switched into chemical engineering, which was an interesting process in and of itself. But I started applying, the grad school applications are normally in the fall, and so I started preparing some of my applications in the summer before my last semester of undergrad. And then throughout the fall semester, you will potentially refine your essays, get feedback from your research advisor, from other grad students, from your other references, because you'll most of the time have to have either 2 or 3 references, and so obviously your research mentor, maybe one, or your faculty mentor, maybe one of those references, but then you maybe have other references from, like if you did any TAing, or you did any volunteering, or you did some other activity where someone could really vouch for your ability to perform whatever task they're asking of you. So then that gives you a good bit of time throughout the fall to kind of refine your essays. The other thing is that the other advantage to getting started a little bit earlier is if you're interested in applying for fellowships like the NSF-GRFP, the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, which I know is a really popular and really, there are a lot of grad students that will get funding through the NSF-GRFP, and actually the time when it's easiest to apply is when you're an undergrad, because you can either apply in your last year of undergrad or your first or second year of grad school. And you can apply in your last year of undergrad and either your first or second year of grad school. And so if you're interested in applying to that, I didn't end up applying to that for a few reasons in undergrad. But if you're interested in applying to that, those due dates are also in the fall. And so it also incentivizes you getting started earlier. And even though you will find out after the grad school admission decisions come out whether or not you got the NSF-GRFP, it can be really nice if you're talking to faculty members that you might be working with. Like, I also have NSF, and as a result, I'm already pre-funded. I'm fully funded for this project that I said I'm going to do. But I will say the other thing about the NSF is that the project that you say that you're going to do as if you apply as an undergrad does not have to be what you do when you're in grad school. Where if you're applying as an undergrad, a lot of the time, what the reviewers may be more wanting to see is are you thinking critically about research? Are you interested in research? Are you already thinking about, this seems really interesting to me and I'm really passionate about it? And so you can write it about something that is really relevant to your research in undergrad and is kind of tangentially related to the research that you're hoping to do in grad school, but maybe not necessarily. Once again, I did not apply for NSF in undergrad just because my last semester of undergrad ended up getting really busy and I wasn't able to do it. But all of this advice, take with a grain of salt as a result, and definitely talk to, if you're interested in doing this, it would probably be a good idea to talk to your talk to the grad student research mentor, talk to the faculty research mentor about all of these things that go into the grad school application process. Should I apply to fellowships? When would you like me to send you my essay so that you can look it over? When do you want me to have applied so that I, as the faculty member, or so that the faculty member can get their reference in on time and talk about how awesome of a researcher you are, hopefully. But yeah, I think just starting in that kind of summer before the applications are due is generally what I would recommend doing, as well as being really communicative with whatever research people, whether they're at UT or if you did an REU, I know a research experience for undergrads. I know that's also really popular and something that people will do. If you did an REU, really communicating with your REU mentor and being even if they're at another university, hey, I really enjoyed my REU. Would you be willing to write a reference for me as I'm applying for grad school?
Yeah.
Okay, so you are a TA for CHE 210. Can you talk a little bit about what's it like doing that? How did you get involved in that?
Yeah, so actually as a part of being a grad student, at most grad programs, and UT included, you actually have to TA as a part of it. our departmental requirement is you have to TA 2 times. And so some people will TA classes, some people will TA the lab section, some people will TA like the later classes where it's very sort of design heavy and it's more just kind of chatting with you guys and giving you advice as opposed to necessarily teaching. But yeah, no, it was, I really liked being a TA for 210. One, because it's like everyone's getting right into the start of the chemical engineering curriculum, which makes it a little bit easier for me, I will be honest, of like, okay, helping you guys start at the very first part can be really exciting, and sort of seeing you guys work through the first bits of being a chemical engineer can be very cool. But I think the general TA process can depend a lot on the class. Like some classes, it's like you'll host office hours once a week, or maybe help develop the tests, and then that's it. Or as opposed to like for the lab classes, being a TA might mean, being there and being available for the whole time for the people that are doing the lab and being kind of the technical expert, and then also grading lab reports and stuff like that. There are some classes where the TAs do a good bit more teaching. Like in 210, I taught basically 1 day a week with the Excel clinics, as well as, we developed homeworks, and we didn't necessarily do as much of the grading of the homeworks. There were undergrad graders who did the grading of the homeworks, but we would help come up with the tests as well, and then would help grade the tests. And so I think, once again, it really depends on the class. And there are some classes where being a TA is really difficult kind of intellectually. Like if I was going to TA like transport or something like that, I would definitely have to go back and refresh myself, because it's obviously been a little bit since I've taken transport. And so for that class, it's going to be a little bit harder because it's like really, really complicated concepts. But then there are other ones, it's maybe more work of doing a lot of homework creation or doing a lot of grading or something like that. Or maybe there are others where it's not really that much at all, and you're largely just being an extra resource for the professor and helping to answer questions that the students have, either about the class or about the material. Or so yeah, it can vary a lot, but I've only TA'd 210 here twice, and so I don't necessarily know how those other classes are, but I did like TAing 210.
Is there anything that like you wish that you could say to undergrad students, just like blanket statements or advice or anything like that, or like wish that you knew this about your TA?
I don't know. I think that we are here to help you. And also most of the time, like, we are probably going to be a lot closer in age than probably even I and the professor am going to be. And so, like, I don't know, maybe different TAs feel differently, but like you do not need to be super formal with me or anything like that. Like, at the end of the day, kind of the whole utility of having a TA, in addition to helping the professor to coordinate whatever logistics they need to coordinate, is also having someone that maybe can communicate the information in a way that's a little bit closer to y'all and a little bit closer in age or life experience to y'all, to maybe make it so that you can understand it a little bit better. Or that's how I see the role of the TA. And so, like, don't be afraid ever to go to office hours. I mean, with that having been said, also don't be afraid to reach out to the professor. Like, the vast majority of professors would love for you to ask questions and would love for you to show that you're engaging with the material, and show that, like, even if you don't understand, like, in my opinion, the whole point of the class is to help you go from not understanding to understanding. And so, like, reach out to the professor and or the TA. If you're ever not understanding, go to office hours, which I know can be pretty intimidating at times, of like going in, especially if you like feel like you don't know anything. But like, even sometimes saying that, I know there are times when I went into office hours and I was, as an undergrad, and I was like, I don't even understand the context for this context. Yeah. So like, can we back up like 5 steps from here? That can be really helpful a lot of the time. And every TA is going to be a little bit different, and maybe there won't be a TA that you resonate as well with their communication style, but I think at the very least giving it a try and giving it a good effort to try and interact with them if there are things that you don't understand, it can be really, really helpful, and I would encourage it.
You were really helpful TA for me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
What was your favorite and least favorite part about being a TA?
So yeah, my favorite part is, honestly, I really liked doing office hours. I really liked just interacting with the students. Because, so like I mentioned before, in undergrad, I did a lot of teaching. I did a lot of tutoring as well in a more one-on-one context. And so I feel like a lot of the time office hours gives you the opportunity to have like a dialogue that you really don't get in class, where class is so much more of a lecture-based style. But I always really liked kind of, seeing people work through the thinking process of like, okay, I get here, I understand up to this point, but what's this one critical step that I'm missing? And then once you kind of help them understand that one time, or that one thing, they're able to make the connection and be like, oh, that makes sense. So then this is related to this, is related to this. And seeing that kind of aha moment was always really awesome. Of like, nice, you get it now. And so, yeah, I always found it really rewarding to kind of see the recognition happen in real time on people's faces. And then as for least favorite, I don't know. I think one of the things I always kind of struggled with, and this is kind of on a broad teaching scale, was the idea of like creating rubrics or grading things, because I don't know. My philosophy is that, the whole point of a class is that you should learn something, and that's inherently going to be a difficult thing to translate, because it's a subjective thing of how much have you learned from this class, into the more objective grading. Not to mention in engineering in particular, in almost any field, there are going to be 15 different ways that you could approach a problem. And so I'm sure you guys may have had the experience of like, I got the right answer, but I didn't do the right formula, and so I didn't get credit. And so I think it's always tricky trying to balance, like, as a TA, there are certain like different approaches where it's like, that's a totally valid approach. I never would have thought of that. And so I didn't account for it on the rubric. And so then I have to go back and be like, okay, this is also a valid way to approach this. While still making sure that everyone gets what they need to out of the class, where like, I'll use 210 as an example, where a lot of the point of 210 is getting you to think about solving these problems in a systematic way of like, you read through the question, you highlight the important parts of the question, you draw your process flow diagram, you draw all of your connections in between your different unit operations, then you are able to solve the problem from there relatively systematically. And so it could be kind of difficult at times of like, that was a valid strategy, but like what we're trying to get you at is we're trying to get you to build a framework in your mind of like the way to solve these problems that may not necessarily always be the right way. And it's good that you're thinking about this in a different way and having flexibility, but also it can be really useful to have a specific language to talk about these problems, or a specific methodology, a specific like, and for lack of a better term, process flow diagram within your mind of like, okay, this goes to this, and then this goes to this, and having like a schematic in your mind of like, okay, this happens and then this happens. Like balancing like the creativity that is inherent in a lot of these engineering problems, in particular as you get into your upper classes, where instead of just learning things, you're also creating things. Balancing the creativity that you guys are coming up with of crazy ways to solve problems with also the necessity of like, making sure that you're getting what you need to out of the class to be the best chemical engineer you can be, whether in industry or in academia or whatever, and tailoring like what the right thing to do is to a broad range of both people and a broad range of futures. Like some people will go into industry, some people go into academia, but obviously the class needs to be tailored around everyone's taking the class. And so it was always interesting for me trying to think of like, I found myself trying to think of like, oh, what's every way that someone could approach this problem? And then there would be 3 other ways on the test that would be totally unaccounted for in my original thinking. And some of the time I was like, dang, that's a really smart way of approaching that I never really thought of. And so, I'm totally going to give you full credit. And then there are other times where I was like, I want to give you points, and like, you're like 90% of the way there, but I feel like there's a really important part that is part of like speaking that shared language, whether it's like, labeling a stream or labeling a unit operation, or it's like, I don't know, and so I think that kind of relates to the broader idea and broader teaching philosophy of trying to grade something and make something objective, which is inherently kind of subjective. But I definitely did my best to try and balance the two, those two kind of competing and conflicting ideas. And I think most professors and most TAs will kind of fall somewhere on the spectrum of wanting to do something really systematically and really test the idea of you to follow things a certain way because there's a lot of value in doing it a certain way, or that's how it has been done, and so that's how it will be done in industry, and so there's a lot of value in learning how to do it that way, as opposed to like rewarding, really, really non-intuitive creative thinking. So, yeah.
Right. Well, I think that wraps up all our questions about academia. Okay. We're just going to ask you a few personal questions.
Okay.
So, obviously, you are a PhD student. This is where you live. This is your city. Do you have any favorite activities in Austin that you like to do?
Yeah. So I like running a lot. I live up in the Hyde Park area, and I love just kind of zigzagging around Hyde Park and running along there, as well as like west. I used to live just closer west of campus, and I would love going down the Greenway down to the whatever the trail is that goes, right by the Barton Greenbelt that goes right by Lamar and takes you all the way down to the river. I ran the Austin Half Marathon a couple of times earlier in my PhD. I wasn't able to do it this last year just because of time, but I really do like running, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to do it again, do that or other races again in the future. And then as well as I'm a part of a community band as well, a part of civic wind ensemble around here, where I played the trombone throughout high school and actually throughout college. And so it's been really nice to kind of have that musical outlet. So I'm not just always thinking about science stuff, as well as to kind of have a mandatory, like more artsy thinking, where there's the adage of like playing music helps to stimulate your creative thinking, and I don't know if that's true, but I sure am hoping it is true. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoy playing music and find a lot of fulfillment from playing in the civic wind ensemble that I play with, where we're all just kind of, all the people in it are just kind of professionals going about their work. Like, it's a pretty broad range of ages. It's not necessarily people that are going into music or anything like that, but I really enjoy doing it. And then as well as my fiance and I really like going to the Broadway in Austin every month. Actually, today we're seeing Hamilton this evening, so that'll be
so good.
Oh yeah, I'd seen it in Atlanta back when I used to live in the Atlanta area, but my fiance has never seen it, and I'm like, no, you're not ready. Yeah. It's really great. Me. Yeah. And so we really enjoy doing that, I think, as well as seeing, musicals that neither of us have seen that maybe are a little bit smaller. Like, afterwards we're coming out and we're like, wow, that had a lot of charm to it, even though I never thought about that, never seen it. Or other ones, we come at it and we're like, it was okay, But yeah, I think hopefully that also helps to show that you can also do things outside of your PhD. Yes. Once again, maybe that gets back to the UT culture, and that I feel like a lot of the PhD advisors here will encourage you to do things. And I know Dr. Rosales and Dr. Kumar, at the very least, are very much like, they want you to have things outside of your PhD that you're also interested in, so that you're a more kind of well-rounded, complete person. Right. Where sometimes the ideas for your PhD may come from like a super random place. So where like, as I'm I can't tell you how many times I've been on a run, and then like in the middle of my run, I've just stopped and been like, oh my goodness, I need to add more. I need to make it more acidic. That'll solve all of my problems. The what? Yeah, exactly. So I think it's good. All of this say it's good to get out of the lab sometimes as well. And I really like, the opportunity to even, like the Broadway in Austin is just once a month, but it's very fun. Or to like do things more consistently, like playing in the Civic Wind Ensemble once a week. So
in undergrad, when you played the trombone, was that in the marching band for the college? Or?
I was in the college marching band
really?
as well.
What was that like? Did you do the traveling for away games?
Yeah, I did get to travel some. It was very fun. You get to go to a lot of cool places. I got to go to Pittsburgh. Got to go to Miami. Got to go to lots of fun different away trips, and Philadelphia one time. But yeah, very cool stuff.
That's sweet.
But, that's not to say I don't travel in grad school as well. Actually, funnily enough, I was, over this whole past week, I was actually in San Diego for the American Chemical Society conference.
Okay, yeah.
Which was super cool. It was actually the first conference that I had been to, and had the opportunity to present. And I'd never been to San Diego, so it was a lot of new for me of just seeing, both kind of getting the opportunity to talk to all these other researchers and hear about their research, and also talk about my research, and then also see the city of San Diego. So very cool.
Well, I think that does it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
it's been
for
amazing.
sure. Thank you all so much for having me today. I really enjoyed kind of chatting with you guys about all of these things, and I would encourage anyone who is interested in any of these things to reach out to whatever faculty or whatever grad student interests you, and keep being curious and keep learning.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Communicator. If you'd like to learn more about UT's Chemical Engineering Department, then check out our other episodes. We hope to see you again. Same time, same place, different reaction.